One of the most common things I see people asking for advice for online in forums is how to improve their descriptions. And that makes sense. The ability to create imaginary vistas filled with impossible creatures and create senses in the minds of the players that are so strong as to cause them a physical reaction is one of the best parts of being a game master. You are your player's portal to another world, and their character sheet is the vehicle. The better your descriptions, the more you will hold their attention and create investment in your story. Now, do not take this to mean that if you're bad at descriptions, you can't be a game master, or that you must improvise with the eloquence of Tolkien. It's a skill that can be learned and continually owned by everyone, from the Mercers, Mulligans, and Iyengar's of the world, down to the person who just wants to run their very first game. So, in accordance with the ancient laws of the YouTube algorithm, here are 10 tips to level up your description game. Number 1. Pre-write your descriptions. Does this feel like cheating? Maybe, but I didn't see any rules against it in the handbook. Especially when you're starting out, it can feel overwhelming to try to describe a bustling town or a bounty hunter in a saloon. You want to describe the briny smell of the morning's catch, shopkeepers arguing loudly in a dozen languages over the weight and price, and the morning sun trying to push through a thick marine layer of clouds. And you kind of want to do it all at once. Where do you start? Pre-writing that description, or even just a list of sense words, the briny smell, the sunlight trying to push through the clouds, or the arguing of the various vendors. That can help you focus and deliver if you don't want to read a pre-written paragraph. Now, pre-written modules do this for game masters all the time, but it's very rare I see someone do this for their own home game. I can tell you I certainly pre-wrote some descriptions for Crit Squad. Remember, there's no right or wrong way, only what works for you. Limit yourself to 3 sentences. This isn't a hard and fast rule, but I find it's a good balance between getting the broad strokes of your scene across and not getting so caught up in description you start to lose your player's attention. Your players' imaginations will fill in a lot of the blanks, actually. In that fish market scene before, I never actually described any of the fish, the cold sea breeze, or what any of the shopkeepers actually looked like. But you could still make an image of it already in your head. Now, if your players want more, don't hold back. Let them know the dwarf with the salt-crusted beard has the biggest crab they've ever seen in their lives. The goal here is not to overload your players with description or give them mixed signals about what's supposed to be important in a given scene. Use multiple senses in this as well. Smell and touch is often overlooked in favor of sight and sound, but they actually have a much greater emotional resonance. Your olfactory and gustatory senses, that is, your sense of smell and taste, is scientifically proven to have a much stronger link to memory. This is why a meal or perfume can take you decades back in time. This leads to creating more of a sense of immersion than just sights and sounds, because it offers a specific sensation and point of view. Next up, build on things they know from media. Part of the reason that fish market scene works is because we've seen it before. Maybe not that specifically, but we know what fish markets look like because of TVs, movies, and maybe we've been to one ourselves. When you're introducing a new scene or NPC, it's a great shortcut to build on things the players already know. I can build on that dwarven fishmonger further, saying maybe they look like a 4'5" Jason Momoa, complete with runic tattoos on their forearms. From this, not only is there a clearer description, my players might subconsciously expect him to act like Jason Momoa as well, which I can lean into or completely subvert. There is a huge swath of cultural knowledge that we all have that you can draw on. Even if your setting, NPC, or artifact are entirely unique, you can still use these touchstones. When we say that a group of wandering nomads act like a bunch of frat bros, it gives a clear indication of how these characters interact with each other, how they'll interact with the players, and what's to be expected, even if there's nothing like this civilization at all anywhere on Earth or anywhere in media. On the other hand, sometimes what we're describing is something very familiar. If I describe a castle in an icy tundra, we're already picturing Winterfell. We don't need to focus on describing piles of snow on rooftops or people wearing layers and layers of furs. Instead, we can move to our next point. Ground it in reality. What is relatable about this scene? In this Winterfell scene, you can maybe highlight how the cold actually catches the breath in your throat, making it hard to breathe. This is a real phenomenon, those in icy climates know, which you can use to take this fantastical idea and ground it in something your players have experienced or can easily imagine. Can they feel the gravel road under their well-worn boots? Are the bare-knuckle boxers' hands covered in scars, moving painfully with arthritis? What about the mechanical clanking of a train passing on a bridge above, rattling the pavement below and turning private conversations into shouting matches? Draw from your own experiences. When I'm world building and imagining these places, I like to walk around for a bit. Just daydream, poking at things and thinking about how they interact. What's a natural consequence of a helpful witch in the woods? Well, they probably don't get into town much, and people like it that way. When someone goes into the woods with a problem, they know it stays private, and there's a certain level of trust. In exchange, townsfolk might bring goods to the witch, handmade crafts, spices, ingredients. Now, what's the natural consequence of that? Well, she's probably going to have an odd collection of mismatched goods and things repaired to varying degrees of proficiency. Grounding these little things adds so much depth to your world and add a sense of being lived in, even if your players never question why. Use emotional description. Describe how NPCs are feeling, the vibe of the tavern, or the sanctity of the church. We should assume player characters can read the room at least a 4th grade level, so give a little bit of description as to the emotional tenor of the NPC or the room that they're entering. Think of something you've seen that inspired an emotion from you. It might be awe at the Grand Canyon, the smallness of standing in Notre Dame, or the rapturous joy of a stadium going absolutely nuts after a come-from-behind victory. You could also add character to things we don't typically consider as having emotions, such as a mischievous horse or an axe begging to be sharpened. You might even describe what emotions it stirs within the player characters. Now, some players will push back against being told how their character feels, which is absolutely understandable. Instead, invite them to help you with the description. How does their character feel? Do they feel any dread as they stare up at Castle Ravenloft? What sort of emotions are stirring as they find their family crest on a tomb on the other side of the world? You know what, let's just call this 5.5. Ask your players for input on the scene. They know best how their characters feel and move through the world, so ask them to reflect back their perception of the scene. Does the rogue feel at home slipping through city streets, while the druid bumps into every other person, completely oblivious to the flow of traffic? Some games even invite players to name or give history to parts of the world. Leading questions are the way to go with this sort of thing. What's the name of their favorite tavern in town? What starship is docked next to theirs at the station? What's the name of the haunted forest to the north? For some, this can provide an extra sense of ownership in the world, while others will push back thinking this is solely the game master's purview. Next up, metaphors and similes are great shortcuts for description. Describing a cobbler as round as he is tall provides a sharp description that will make this NPC stand out in the player's minds. A city of commerce might have the Grand Central Market described as a cathedral, a tavern bouncer being built like a wall, or maybe an ancient sword carries the valor of the dozen souls that wielded it before. This is also a great way to ground something fantastical to something players can imagine. A dire wolf is a large-sized creature, so we know it's a heckin' big pupper, but when you describe it as being the size of a horse, that really gets a reaction out of your players. A kraken tentacle, thick as an old oak tree, wrapping around their ship, or feeling the heat coming off of a dragon like standing next to an open oven. These create sensory holds that can help put a player into their character's shoes more easily. When giving a description, it's important to keep in mind what the players need to know from a scene and how to direct them towards that. There's 2 main methods to do this: emphasis and sequence. Emphasis is to add extra detail, especially something that provokes investigation. Calling out the crimson wax seal embossed with the letter S on the mayor's desk is bound to invite some questions. Whose initial is that? How are they connected to the mayor? There's an unspoken assumption that something this specific must be important, which can also backfire. You might casually add some detail about a squirrel observing the party caravan as they pass by, and that's when the players will jump to the conclusion that the squirrel is a shapeshifter sent by the big bad and spend the next hour trying to catch and interrogate it. It's a hazard of the occupation. The other method, sequence, is to describe the most important detail last. The final detail is going to be what sticks in your player's mind because, well, it's the last thing they heard. It's hard to keep an idea in mind as someone lists off 3 or 4 more aspects of a scene. Not only that, the flow of a sentence, in English at least, wants the most important part to be last. By combining these 2 methods, you'll be subconsciously directing the players where you want them to go. You can build out a scene by establishing the musky smell of the tavern basement, the lantern on top of a crate of vegetables flickering its dying light, and a shimmering puddle leaking from the corner. From this, many players will be drawn to investigate what shimmering actually means in this situation or where the leak is exactly coming from. There's no 100% method to steer all of your players all the time, but these will vastly improve the odds in your favor. The next tip, build your knowledge base. Read. The more base knowledge you have about a setting, the better, and I don't mean reading all of the Forgotten Realms source books. Knowledge about the real world comes in handy quite a lot, and will help lend those more realistic details that makes the world feel more immersive. Your descriptions of the Underdark are going to be so much more lively if you've just read a book on cave formations. Now, this knowledge comes from all kinds of places: reading books, listening to audiobooks, listening to podcasts, and watching documentaries. All things that tie into your setting is going to give you a much broader depth of knowledge, and you'll be able to improvise and even be inspired by more specific things that you've learned. If you're going to run a pirate game, knowing what a barnacle actually is, why they need to be scraped from the hull, what a brass monkey is, even just which side is port and which is starboard, are all going to help you feel more confident in your descriptions, and it's going to make the world feel more lived in and detailed. And of course, your research might prompt new adventure ideas and descriptions that you can steal for yourself. A great game master has a strong vocabulary, and there's no downside to learning a few new words here and there. This isn't just limited to the hard facts either. Read sci-fi, fantasy, historical fiction. A wide diet of books will help improve your descriptions by seeing how others do them. Hell, you can even list some descriptions from your home game directly from books that your players aren't familiar with. I promise we won't tattle on you for stealing a few banger descriptions from Warrior Cats. Use words that build on tone and genre. Speaking of words, which words you use in the description will help sharpen your game's tone and subtly steer your players towards your game's chosen genre. City of Mist does a fantastic job highlighting this, with a bunch of noir and cinematic words printed directly onto the Game Master screen. They're broken down into categories like lighting, weather, cinematic, and each of these is filled with words that evoke comic book and film noir motifs. Environmental words like melancholic persistent rain, sweltering inner city heat, and cinematic terms like close-up and fade in keep the chosen motif close at hand for the Game Master. This does mean you have to ask yourself, what exactly is your chosen tone and genre of your game? Horror settings tend to anthropomorphize the setting, describing branches as reaching out over the road, or the smell of rot crawling up from a tomb. A game based around martial arts might have a series of moves, holds, and stances. A gritty, Dark Ages fantasy might mention the squelching mud with every step, and veterans begging for spare coins on the side of the street. This is where that reading will really come in handy, as you start to pick up consistent patterns across books and genres. Lastly, just tell your players what they see. This is a little more gameplay oriented, but there's enough overlap, we're gonna go with it. Don't hide your beautiful descriptions behind a die roll. Most of us, or at least our characters, are pretty observant, and we're gonna notice things that aren't actively hidden. This also means anything plot relevant, such as a hidden passageway or secret letter, shouldn't be hidden behind a die roll. The core of this is most of us play TTRPGs in order to do fantastical, cool stuff, and when a die roll makes you feel like a bozo or grinds the game to a halt, that's generally something to be avoided. Rolling a 1 on a perception check shouldn't mean you don't see the bard on the stage or even the shadowy figure in the corner. It might mean you don't notice your coin purse getting nicked though. Well, that's just about all the time we have. If you have any questions, comments, or things you'd like us to talk about, you can leave them in the comments below. Shoot us an email at biscuitwolfgames@gmail.com or find us on Blue Sky at biscuitwolfgames. You can also find our games and supplements at our itch.io or at DriveThruRPG under the Biscuit Wolf banner. We'll see you next time.